Thank you. Wow. It's really great to hear what brings you here. There's so much. And even in just convening like this, and even just having conversation, I think is an act of art and is a creative tool. And I think, to address something that you were saying about how can we, you said something about how can we comprehend and deal with the magnitude of climate change, and how can the imagination and art be used. I think that it's an artistic practice in itself to bring our minds and voices and imaginations even in a room just to talk through. I think that's like a really crucial, really simple thing, is just talking. And I think that that's necessary for these times as part of the process to move through this. So there's one little thing. Keep talking. Just to pick up on what you're saying about what we might need to give up in the process, and how the arts can respond to that notion, that idea, that question. I think we're just seeing it happen. I think that's a new question, actually, for us all. And I'm not sure yet whether I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but I think this is a new opening for the arts or for creative practice to embody or to start having conversation about that very question. And for me, that comes out of Jem Bendel's paper. I never know if I'm pronouncing his name right. Jem Bendel?
Just make sure it rhymes, right?
Just Jem Bendel. Jem. Hi, Jem. Jem's paper on deep adaptation. And correct me if I'm wrong, Sam, or anyone else, but the 3 or 4 questions, is it 3 or 4?
The sort of framework.
The framework.
Yeah.
But what is it that we might need to restore in these times? What might we need to relinquish? And I think that's what you're speaking to there, about what might we need to let go of, and how do we build resilience? I think it was just those 3.
I don't know if he added an extra one, but the 4th one is reconciliation.
Okay,
So what do we need to make peace with?
that's interesting. That's not in his paper, is it?
Yeah, I
Or
wonder
is
if
it?
he might have added that more recently.
Okay. Wow, that's an interesting one. Great. So I hope that what I can share with you, ready to go.
We'll try the narrative.
Okay. Cool. So, yeah, welcome. So I'll give a bit more of an introduction as to what I've been up to, as just to provide examples, really, and to spark conversation and your own ideas as to how we can reimagine what art and culture's role is in times of such climate and ecological emergency, and how we use culture and art. And so some of you are working on specific campaigns or specific businesses even, let's say, or even within Extinction Rebellion. So I want to provide space for you to contemplate how your particular campaign or action, and you can dream one up here today if you don't have one, how your campaign or action can promote any demands or aims that you might have for the future that you wish to see. So we'll unpack that as we move through. But here we go. So, just a nice first provocation there. Politics is not solely or even primarily about reasoned thinking and rational choices. It's an affair of fantasy and desire. People are rarely moved to action, support, or even consent by realistic proposals. They're motivated by dreams of what could be. So, yeah, this is working. So, culture declares is something that I co-launched with others on the 3rd of April. And that was, as I said, a space for cultural practitioners, arts organisations or artists to declare climate and ecological emergency for themselves and to we've provided a template declaration that can be adapted to meet zero carbon by 2025, for example, but also to reimagine how they can use their spaces and their resources in times of emergency. We had about 200, up to 200 artists and organisations declare on the 3rd of April, and we're looking at, I think, around 400 now, and we've got an event coming up. So it's had really great wide appeal, and it covers all sorts of, when we talk about the arts, it's quite a varied thing. So we're talking about those who are writers or authors, visual artists, theatres, museums. So it's really broadening the idea of, well, what is art and what is culture? And so I invite you to look further into this if you self-identify in any way as an artist or cultural practitioner. We staged a creative, some might call it a stunt. We called it I think a performance ritual through the streets of London on the 3rd of April on a horse, following a procession led by a horse, and here this lady dressed in a coat made of grass. We travelled through London, starting at Somerset House, which was one of the declaring organisations, and crossed Waterloo Bridge and went through the Tate, this is the Tate here, past the National Theatre, and ended at Shakespeare's Globe. And at each stop made declarations of our intent with many artists present. And so I'll just show you, if this hopefully will work, a video of that day. This is where I need technical support. Make it wide. Is there sound?
Is that real grass?
Where's these?
So this coat is made by artists Heather and Dan Aykroyd. I really recommend having a look at what they do.
Is it allowed to ride a horse?
It's when you press
They got permission. Yeah.
volume, it's just saying blank.
Yeah,
Is that on?
I'm never going to be able to solve the climate crisis at this rate.
Let's abolish technology.
Okay, so
Maybe it'll happen.
I am the future. But before I appear, please shut your eyes. Listen. Things are going to change. I'm not trying to frighten you. Think of me not as a wish or a nightmare, but as a story you have to begin to tell yourselves. Not with an ending in which everyone lives happily ever after, or a B-movie apocalypse, but maybe starting with the line, to be continued. See what happens. Remember this, I am not written in stone, but in time. So please don't shrug, don't say, what can we do, it's too late.
I did not mean to kill the last of the salmon. I just forgot the thrill of leaping through the surging foam. I did not mean to kill the last of the spiders. I just forgot to feel the geometry and sway of weaving a silken web. I did not mean to kill the last of the honeybees. I just forgot the sound of the thrum at the heart of the hive. I did not mean to kill the last of the oak trees. I just forgot how it feels to stand for 100 years.
We are individuals and organisations from the arts and culture section. We declare a climate and ecological emergency. We pledge to work with and support our community and local government in tackling this emergency. And we call on others to do the same.
We will take action, working towards reducing our carbon emissions to net zero by 2025 and working towards regenerating the planet's resources. We are committed to justice, supporting demands for more democracy within our civic institutions and within our government. We invite you to join us.
Declaring a climate and ecological emergency and call on others to do the same. It's incumbent on governments, broadcasters and cultural organisations to communicate the extent of the climate and ecological emergency and the urgencies of the challenge we face. The climate crisis is also a crisis of the imagination. If we cannot imagine a more sustainable and just way of living, we cannot achieve it. Artistic and cultural institutions can be powerhouses of change, helping to create and forge new ways of thinking and doing. Now is the time to meet the emergency with imagination.
Is that working on the other end?
Yes.
Great. There you go.
Great.
We
Yeah.
decided to work with OK.
Oh, that's another video now playing.
At the Inside Show a couple.
Yeah. So yeah, I hope that shows what we launched into the world, and it's really just the beginning. So, is this right? Oh yeah. So part of what you heard being read was not only our declaration text and our pledges, but also letters to the earth. The video opened with Tamsin, who read one of the letters to the earth that was received. And so what the letters to the earth was an initiative to invite a cultural response to the emergency through written letters. And you can see the call out here, but it was an invitation to write letters to the earth, to future generations, to past generations, to other species, to those in positions of power and influence.
Just a moment.
Oh,
What's happening now?
We've got the same problem again, I think. I think it's the screen mirroring.
Sorry about that. What problem?
We're not mirroring the
but we're editing
screen.
later.
It's just showing
so
this.
we'll make sure
sorry,
that
all
it's just a really
live
problem.
people,
Is there
technical
any-
problems.
Is there any other way we can do this in PowerPoint? Because Can you just get it to go big without it doing the...
Maybe if we just export that as PDF and just open
No,
that.
just try it again. It was working a second ago.
Oh, it's working now.
Can I put it on the full screen?
The little lag.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, it keeps doing that.
Okay,
It's
there we go.
working.
It's working.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great. So letters to the earth, letters to future species, well, maybe, future generations, past generations, other species, people in positions of power or influence, anyone and anything. It was an opportunity to express what you needed to express in a personal way through writing. And those letters, so this was a campaign that was launched by Culture Declares Emergency. And we thought, we might just have a few letters. We had 1,000 letters from all over the world come through within 4 weeks. So we launched this in February and it closed at the end of March in time for our launch on the 3rd of April. But like I say, we had responses from South Africa to Canada to Latvia to Australia to Gambia, everywhere. And the invitation was for venues to sign up to host these letters, to present these letters on the 12th of April. So on one day, on that Friday, we had 52 venues across the world again present a selection of letters that we sent batches to each of those venues. And those venues could be theatres, so theatre buildings, art galleries, community and civic spaces. It was really open as to what do we even mean by venue? How do we transform space into civic and community space? And so this is a list of all those places that presented those letters, and we offered the initiative for those venues to respond in a way that they could. So it might be a public event, it might be an event just for their staff, and we encourage people to work with the people that they already have in their building or in their organisation, but also to make sure that young people were somehow at the heart of it. And if they were able to bring in well-known performers, then that was great too, for greater impact. And so I haven't actually got it here, but we were really fortunate enough to have people like Andrew Scott present one of our letters. Andrew Scott, who's quite well known at the moment from Fleabag and other TV shows. We recorded him reading a letter, and that just went viral, and that was just something that we put out online on our Twitter. So this is an example of some of the spaces, some pictures there of some of the spaces that responded. On the 12th of April, we've got the Royal Court here, the Lyric, Hammersmith, both theatres worked with their young associates, their young companies to present. There's a picture here of a group from America reading the letters together. It was wonderful. We had letters from someone as young as a 4-year-old up to great-grandparents. Nurses responded. Yoko Ono submitted one of her poems from the 70s. Kate Tempest submitted one of her published pieces. Well-known playwrights, as well as, like I say, just the general public. So it was a really beautiful way of giving space to people's emotional responses to the emergency, and to come together in community to hear those voices. And the reason we designed it to be on the 12th of April, because you may remember that the 15th of April was quite a pivotal date. That's when International Rebellion began. So we wanted to signpost people into the rebellion the following week, and that's exactly what it did. The letters were then also made available, or some of the letters, because we had 1,000, we didn't expect so many. We made some of the letters and put together a short script with some of the voices that were made freely available for anyone around the world to present anywhere for those 2 weeks of rebellion. And so we invited people to read these letters at those key sites in London. You may have seen that Marble Arch, Parliament Square, Oxford Circus, Waterloo Bridge were taken over by Extinction Rebellion. And on this day of love, on the 19th of April, we announced a day of love at the International Rebellion. And that began at Piccadilly Circus, which was at the heart of the rebellion and was a space that was taken over by the exile youth activists. And with them, we declared a day of love, and they presented, together they sang, you can see here, Yoko Ono's song that she'd submitted. And together, here you can see that we read the 20-minute script that we put together of the voices from the Letters to the Earth, working with, so those presenting were youth strikers, were young performers, and some well-known performers too. You might recognise this actress here. Emma Thompson was reading one of our letters on the pink boat in Oxford Circus, and so we caused quite a publicity stir, and there's quite a well-known picture of the pink boat in Oxford Circus being surrounded by police, which looks like a bit of a donut, so I'm quite proud to have been a part of instigating that. But here, the letters were read everywhere. We don't know all the places that they were read, but we captured some being read at Parliament Square. The invitation was for anyone to pick up the book or download or read from online. So, yes, this is what I want to show you next. So when we're talking about culture declares, so like I say, we wove in some of those letters into the day of declaration, and they were read too. But I find it quite interesting to contemplate on the word culture. Has several meanings. I mean, the way of life, especially the general customs and beliefs of a particular group. It can mean art, so in all of that, all of art's variety, music, theatre, literature, visual art, and more. It's also the activity of keeping living things living and growing. So I like to think of culture as the values that we live by that reflect the times that we live in. And like art, the culture that we live by can respond to the times that we live in. It can change and it can grow. So I just want to kind of open up dialogue to reflect on what culture do you see in what I've just presented to you of the activities that we did at the Culture Declares launch day and from the Letters to the Earth that I've shown you. What culture do you see? And there are, maybe you can speak in pairs for just a couple of minutes to reflect on what the culture is that you can see in that activity that I've shared. And then we'll hear some reflections on that. Yeah, you can join up as a three. I'll happily listen to you. I'll just have my ear like that. So you can speak in your pairs, and then we'll reflect and share together.
Tell me first. I'll tell you if it's a good idea or not.
Culture is more empathy.
So specifically, what culture do you see in the activity of Culture Declares and Letters to the Earth? Just to respond to what you saw first of all.
Is try to take responsibility somehow. Between taking responsibility and more somehow push ahead in some direction instead to be apathic and doing nothing.
I think that example, I think taking the reference point of like somebody in the future. Or just this whole idea of like
there's like articles and culture.
like taking a
so
completely
like
different time.
the expression of a particular artistic principle,
I think
which may be spoken words
instead of talking
or
about
like
over tomorrow,
noise or visual
take on board what
presentation of something.
is already will be like
suppose,
like it's today. With like it's
Are you referring to something special?
I suppose
like for
what
that.
they did was kind of give us a voice to people
I think
to express something that's quite difficult.
yeah, I think it's
It's
quite
almost
powerful
in
to
a,
have
to be an
the jacket
analogy.
made out
Yeah,
of glass.
to give the option of analogy.
And the horse, so using like something that
Yeah, like
tracks
strong
the eye,
metaphor.
catches you.
Having it comes across.
On the white
I think it was quite symbolic in that sense.
horse.
It's just
Yeah, the innocence.
Even on a kind of everyday kind of thing, like clothing, for example. You have to kind of outward things stick it out. Even what we wear, I think, has to be kind of.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean that there's a shift in culture. Is like tiny, minute presentation of, by the way, of niche of people which are known as artists.
Yeah, I mean, culture isn't only expressed by artists, is it? I think it's
It is because this is a small
Yeah,
presentation.
I think it was like in some ways
When you talk about art, doesn't mean that behind art is
it's
this
just in the seed in different perspectives,
artist.
but
It
more
could be
like
an original
there's
person
hope.
in a
People
cave
stop, people
doing
listen to
something.
this,
Yeah.
people are hearing them out.
Piece of carved wood in
And
Africa
you think-
by
make them
someone.
think
Oh,
that
it's
probably
in the
would feel
island.
And it's
better.
considered
You know
10
what?
years later, it's
There's
considered
maybe
piece of
something
art.
of these people are talking about that I think about now.
I'm not very good with
And it probably just
abstract
happened
subjects.
but the fact that, you know,
I'm now thinking of that
there's
guy
different
who
pockets of London.
has his final art thesis in Martin,
Maybe
soldiers,
if we was in more places,
sold his virginity,
more people would see that. More noise would be made.
public,
Yeah?
publicly, yeah, like, yeah. So I think there's a quite
Is a guy or a girl?
guy, no, there's many,
So I wonder what's the take of such it.
Yeah.
70 years old.
Yes, he wasn't preaching.
maybe,
Yeah,
yeah.
he wasn't preaching.
It's very,
Um,
the issue is it's kind of
I think
specific gatherings is the risk that there will be
yeah, I feel like almost like
non-inclusive.
it felt like
Yeah.
Because
familiar
in
thought.
order to
Okay.
understand
Behind
Let's
it.
bring whatever thought you're on, let's just bring it to a close in your groups. Thank you. Be really nice to share some things that were reflected from your pairs. So let's start. Yeah.
Yeah, I think just when that gentleman was speaking about the apologizing for the bees no longer existing and all that, I think that kind of reference point was very powerful. I think taking the perspective of speaking from the perspective of future, I think it just kind of set the pace on where I thought that was one of the great examples, but also just how it people stopped and heard what was happening over there. And I think it was a message that was probably in them also, but just were not able to kind of say it out themselves, and they needed another medium to be able to say it on their behalf. And perhaps more and more of this is probably needed.
Instead of like always maybe preaching and saying, yeah, you have to believe it, using another mean like poem or song can actually touch some chords, some feelings of the people that like didn't feel about it before and just realize, okay, we are here, we need to go there and yeah, just touches more the feelings without preaching something.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Yeah, we had a little chat about analogy and how analogy and metaphor quite sort of like present. I was just thinking then that that perhaps the unique quality of culture, or the thing that makes it distinctive, is it has no barrier to entry, or theoretically it has no barrier to entry, and I guess theoretically it should be possible to activate people through culture much easier than it would be to activate people through systemic change or something like that. Because culture is I guess an amorphous concept that by definition involves everybody who is part of a given culture, even if they don't feel involved in it. And it's something anyone can kind of take a voice in, express something through. And I suppose if you kind of activate that allowance, activate that possibility in people, then
But there's also a problem, because nowadays, especially in the political spectrum, so many people feel misrepresented. They initially decided not to stand, because they don't recognize themselves. And then, without knowing it, they become silent and passive.
Yeah.
So when we use truly, culture should be open to everyone, but the reality is that nowadays there are many people, and thanks also to the very fast changing of interaction with the digital world. You, especially in the new generation, you see a phenomenon which is heartbreaking. It's like apathy.
But there is a saturation of voices as well,
Yeah.
I think.
It is true, yeah. For example, the classical example, if you go to academia, I saw it on my own self, and it was like, really? There's so many information that the people start to not taking it anymore. So you don't know anymore what is true, what is right, what you should follow or obey, or what should discard completely. And this is an academic environment. I can't imagine being outside an academic environment and try to understand what's really is going on and what really should I do to save my own skin and first, and then try to put a plan with someone else to, okay, we should really do something about what's going on the rest of the local area or planet. But I'm not going to the dimension, you know what I'm trying to say. But I think is the real challenge. And as a proof of it is, I keep asking myself this: why every time you need a famous person to join in to get approval from the masses? You know, why you need to? For example, I was acting with a SAR group. Jeremy Iron is a patron, and even among ourselves, the head of operation was saying, "Oh, and we were surprised. Jeremy Iron will come." What do you mean? We would do it anyway, what we are doing, even if Jeremy Iron is not here, because we are part of that culture, you know.
It's a very interesting one and a funny one, because absolutely these things will happen whether or not those well-known people choose to or be a part of it or not. But there's several things to say on that. There's a certain outreach potential, unfortunately, because of the culture we live in.
So how can Jeremy Iron reach out, and the fact that the 70% of the animal kingdom is disappearing doesn't?
Yeah.
Is this the point?
It's because people, even though it's virtual, people have a prior relationship with people who are in the public sphere, even though it's a one-way relationship. Like, you identify with characters that you see on TV, you identify with the person who reads the news, you identify with a journalist who you like, who writes things. It's because you already have a relationship with those people. You could very well have a new relationship with someone else who's speaking on behalf of a movement.
That means, I think, we don't have any more a relationship with what really matter. It's our environment.
Yeah, and those people are part of the environment too. This is an all-encompassing movement about a planet that is in crisis, and we all live on this same planet. And actually there's something very important about what you were saying about culture being about everyone, and so to not disinclude anyone from that space, but like you say, to also actively make sure that you're encouraging those voices, or those marginalised voices that may not step up or may historically have been suppressed, to have space to give voice and step up to reach to those groups and to invite those groups or those individuals into the space.
Just to be devil's advocate for a second, is there any maybe something that the urgency maybe adds to the equation, that maybe now isn't the time for a panoply of voices, and maybe we just need one voice saying, okay, we all need to act.
We're in an
I don't mean one voice, but maybe we don't. Now's not the time for disparate opinions and for everyone to voice how they feel about it. Just to be devil's advocate, because I'm very sympathetic to this.
We're at a point where emergency's been declared, right? Yeah. And there are two options. We can either have more democracy to meet the necessity of emergency, or we can have less. And that might look like
Benevolent
a monopoly
dictatorship.
of ideas or some kind of dictatorship and some kind of fascism. And so we're at that point, we're at that fork in the road. And, you know, thank you for being devil's advocate, but I would say that the greatest task right now is to make sure that the culture in response to this emergency is as broad as is required to recognise that everyone's a part of this.
Yeah, I mean, it's axiomatic that everyone is a part of it because everyone's survival is as threatened as everyone else's.
Exactly.
But I suppose it's more about whether or not the response is diluted by a panoply of voices. That's the only. I'm
We
not saying
can,
it is,
yeah.
but yeah.
This will come up when, I will introduce you later on to the 3 demands of Extinction Rebellion, and the Citizens' Assembly is an answer to that. And although I'm someone that is involved actively in Extinction Rebellion, there are many places that I can direct you to get more answers on that model of the demand of a Citizens' Assembly, which answers what you're speaking to. Yeah.
I would like to go along with what he said. I actually agree with him, and in the sense that someone should, some people with a relevant position in society, recognized by everyone, should stand up and say, "Guys, is enough." May I ask you to all of you, how many of you knows that the Pope did this 2 weeks ago? The Pope wrote a letter, and it was read in St. Peter's Square about environmental issue. How many of you are aware of it?
Yeah.
And then the Pope, he's representing a massive portion of humanity, because Christianity is quite, but still, in the Christian circle, there's not much emphasis about it. That is the first point I would like to make along with it. The second is, people need to be aware that they can make the choice and take the responsibility. But when you're taking responsibility, it's like admitting the mistakes. A few years ago, after my first deployment in Nigeria, I came back and I told to my mother about the poverty, the extreme poverty I saw over there. And my mother said to me, "Good Christian, I don't want my wealth being based on the poverty of these people." I said, "Mom, are you joking? How many light bulbs we have in the kitchen? We have 12 light bulbs. Do you think that tungsten, which is the mineral, which is allow the light bulb to function, comes to a cheap price for which reason? It's because some of us is out there squeezing the lemon." So, but as soon as I said so, I could see the reaction, the impact. Oh, that wasn't me. It is you too.
Yeah. So what you're speaking about is the reconciliation aspect of this work, and I think also justice. But I'm going to thank you for those comments. I want to make sure that we've got a plurality of voices in the room, and that we hear now from the 2 women in the other group about your reflections on what culture you saw in the activity of Culture Declares and Letters to the Earth. And with Sam too, I know that you were speaking with them, but over to you and what your reflections are.
I think one of the things is that as a community, as a species, what do we want to keep? And for me, the other day I was in the underground and literally everyone was in their phone, not looking up, and it's just, we're so immersed in technology that I think we've lost kind of that bonding we used to have, years ago. And I think as a species, I would like to, to stick to that and not lose it. And what I can see in those events we were discussing that is that the ability to communicate what we feel, our emotions, and everyone to be heard. So I think that's really important in this topic.
I was thinking about when you talk about the verb of culturing something, so I thought that was quite nice that you had that on the bottom, that what you were doing with your declaration did seem like beginnings of sort of seeds of things that would grow and get much bigger, so that seems a kind of lovely way of thinking. And then I was thinking also about maybe more, slightly more primitive people that might be getting together in their little tribe, their little groups, and being together and marking events, and that obviously we've got into a kind of way of life where we're very separate in our cultures, but it feels like if we're thinking about one end, like the planet, it feels like there can be some sort of primitive need in us almost to get together, to get into a little, you know, I always say it's a bit like a stunt, but just literally being together with like-minded people and walking together almost has, some of it almost has to me a kind of spiritual quality to it, particularly because I feel my compassion is so much for the whole globe. It's like this wonderful planet that's in the middle of nowhere. And I think, because once you start thinking out there, you do almost get into a spiritual realm, don't you? And I think that when I went down to the meetings at, I went to Marble Arch and I went to Parliament Square, a sort of feeling of strong community and I think the thing about the welcome that comes from other people is so strong, you know, and that, anyway, I don't know where I'm going, I'm just a bit inarticulate about it.
No, thank you, that's really beautiful comments. Yeah. Anything you want to share?
Maybe just I think the thing that resonated most with me was the fact that it was like giving people the opportunity to express themselves through this letter writing and then, you know, meeting with others. And that it felt like it had a sort of therapeutic quality to it. And that maybe that was sort of almost like the culture we're trying to create is like, actually, you know what, we're kind of all going through this slightly horrific and scary thing. Be nice to be able to talk about it. Yeah, I think that was one for me.
Yeah, culture of therapy, to not be dismissed, actually. Great. Yeah, thank you. It's really rich already. I'd really love to reflect.
Okay, hang on.
Is this working?
Did you reach out to all of the organizations yourself to ask if they wanted to join?
We reached out to venues or organisations or individuals that we had relationships with already, and there was a team of us. But it was also in order to address what's been raised about making sure we're reaching to those that we don't know, and to as many diverse people as possible and groups as possible. We had a very strong press campaign. So press releases, videos, on a social media presence, and so we had no idea that it would be picked up in so many other countries as well.
So you were contacted by many?
We were contacted by others, and the great thing about the relationships that we had, just because of the work that we've been doing as individuals, meant that those places then shared with their communities and their reach. So I think it really did kind of, you know, talking about culture being a living thing that grows, it really did grow without us being in control of it, which I think is a strength of culture in this sense. I think let's keep to these little groups just for conversation. Again, just a couple of minutes to reflect on the culture that, some of you have already started to speak to it, the kind of culture that you say we live in, either now or prior to now, the culture that has got us into the mess we're in today. It's a bit of the antithesis, perhaps, of what we've just reflected on. What is the dominant, maybe that's a way of thinking about it, the normative, the dominant culture that we live by. And actually, I'm aware that even the way I'm saying that I may be colouring it negatively, because that might not be the case. There might actually be some things about our current culture that is, you know, a positive thing. But what kind of culture would you say we do live in right now, or that may have got us into this crisis?
And maybe just to say, if you're watching this as a video or a webinar, then feel free to write this perhaps on your own, or if you're with someone else, to discuss it with them. But you can also do these exercises as well.
Great, thanks, Sam. So I'll just give you a couple of minutes.
All right.
And if you want some paper, throw your hands up and we can give you some paper and pens if that's useful for you.
Okay, so I just saw recently, sort of video with one of these groups that you guys suggested, and how society and how the world will against psychological purpose. So, and graphic website.
Yeah.
Well, I would say if you look at that like an example, use agriculture, monoculture, polish the soil, because when you go into monoculture, take a large area, who's able to buy such quantity of whatever culture you're doing? Big companies they turn to make their own contracts themselves. So you need to force to carry on that price to get it somewhere else. So if you move agriculture to civil society.
Well, I mean, it's analogous, isn't it?
It's an analogy, yeah.
I suppose if you zoomed out on that example, it's like, it's actually an example of separation. Like, if you have a monoculture, it's more like you're separating out species into kind of, dominant, discarded. And I suppose that model is analogous to the way that humans deal with
because from these
spiritual,
being tribes and groups, they become, again, this word comes from like a passive, like patch of people.
I think, you touched on a lot of things that I think.
I would say generalization, when they say that there's a word, the term to express the word in general,
Yeah, actually, that's a good point.
globalization. You don't recognize more anymore.
I mean, I suppose the Western world is a global
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, with certain identities. Yeah, definitely.
Yes, certainly. There are still a group of people, as an example.
We all share a pretty common identity.
Yeah, like for example, I'm Italian.
The other person.
I don't recognize any more myself as that. I keep saying Italian, but in reality, I should, I
actually directly affected by this problem.
You're definitely not Italian.
No, this is what I'm saying. You reach a point which you blame too much to recognize your religion. So in that process, there's a chance you lose
stripping away pieces of both.
very important
we have a disconnection
regarding the generation before your mother, your father, grandparents, or some important point that should be in this book there are few stories about it's like play by major culture. They give to God, they give the product, they do things that make you forget who you really are and where you should be. And in that you become the number. So the trio is the creation, it's an object. Most of the people you can find, they have be or they have instead to rather move them outside. So it's just losing this path of reasoning. With common sense.
I suppose like all of like
a lot of it is like
they end up focusing on this one
control over everything, control everything.
But this is which is totally opposite what we should be. Because I remember seeing when I was young, if a spider would come in the house, if a certain bird would come close to the house, he used to, my mother, my grandfather, used to say, oh, it's going to rain, oh, the wind is changing, oh, this, you used to look at me, point at the future and say,
okay. Lots of conversation there, but we'll bring that to a close wherever you are now. Just bring that thought to a close. There's so much we could say. But what I'd like to hear is just one word, and we'll go round that might that comes to you that maybe was said in your groups that is reflective of the culture that we live in now? Things that came up, just one word, or if it needs to be a phrase, that's fine, but just short little headlines of the culture that we live in now.
Isolation.
Sorry?
Isolation.
Based on a short term.
Individualistic.
Screens.
Screens.
Yeah.
Like one of these, Luca.
Yeah.
But I don't understand the relation screens like.
As part of the culture. So one word
I don't know
headline.
the words. You know when you have the optical effect of mirror, so many mirrors, and you look at in one mirror, and you see yourself 10,000 times.
Yeah, mirror.
Yeah. Have you seen that?
Yeah, I have diffraction.
I don't know if it's diffraction. Is there are two
Like
mirrors, one's in front of the other,
Yeah,
and they reflecting the image to the infinite.
Okay.
To the point that you don't know anymore what is real, what is wrong. You know, your perception is completely gone.
Okay, great, good, thank you.
Yeah.
I get it now. Yeah.
I'm sober. Come Saturday to the pub.
So we'll keep it to one word or short phrase headlines. So Julian?
Bit more prosaic.
Individual convenience.
I suppose Western world in a bubble. The Western world being in a bubble.
And we can popcorn any other headline words. If anyone has anything else they just want to throw in that maybe came up, just headline words of the culture that we live in now. If there's anything else.
Separation and isolation.
Zero hours contract.
Mass consumption.
Really long supply chains.
Really long.
Supply chains.
A job to pay the bills.
Okay. What I'd invite you to do now is to begin to imagine the future that we'd like to see. And I'd like you to move, so find a new partner that you haven't spoken to, or maybe someone that you don't know, and sit with them. So just have a bit of a reshuffle. Up you get. Movement is key.
Hey.
And this is going to be a timed exercise, and so I'm sorry I'm using my screen, but I'm doing it for a stopwatch. So we've got pairs, which is great. So decide on who's going to speak first in your pair. So just make a decision between yourselves. Great, nice and simple. Doesn't need to be complicated. And so what I'd like, the first person, I'm going to give you an open sentence, and the first open sentence is, in the future I would like to see, and your partner's just going to listen for 1 minute. So it's active listening. You're not responding to it. Try not to add words. Just listen to your partner. Reflect on that open sentence. And I'm going to give you a minute to speak on that. And you don't have to fill it with words all the time. So I would like to, in the future, I would like to see, and you can maybe specify it, if that's even a word, a bit more by saying, in the future, the culture, or the kind of culture I'd like to see is. Off you go.
shit
to learn through.
it's
I think it's gonna have to be that kind of soothing, like, I guess, a shared experience.
lots of talking,
Also listening, yeah.
a lot of listening, a lot of listening, and obviously stuff towards the
It's really hard to know
fantasy things.
it's almost maybe like a culture that somehow finds a way to
Ding, 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 ding. I unfortunately don't have a bell with me, but that's your bell. That's the minute up. So you can bring that thought to a close if you need to. We're going to swap. So keep it active listening. So in the sense that give that space to your partner. In the future, the kind of culture, or in the future I'd like to see. Off we go.
maybe just if people are online, they can journal it.
Yeah, journal it online, free write for a minute.
And they can share with us in the text if they understand.
Yeah, exactly, great. So I keep forgetting that there are other participants, so thank you. Hello. So starting in the future, the kind of culture I'd like to see is, off you go.
In the future, kind of culture I'd like to see is where two random strangers can randomly speak to each other without having the pressure of awkwardness.
Awareness.
Because they have something that pulls them together.
Awareness of connectivity.
Their surroundings. In the future, I'd like to see a place where we can openly invite other people for having dinner.
Shrinking of our amygdalas
And extending that invitation to their friends. They know that if this person is friendly, then friends probably end up like this people also. And it'd be great to just be able to just have this news, this kind of feeling. I think in the future, I'd love for people to be inspired, because a small group of people, or two people, they're just able to have this
more shared living environment.
Ding, 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 ding. Wow, everyone responded to my bell, thank you. Great, thank you. I know that you could speak for more on that, but it's always, I think, interesting to see what first comes out. I'm now going to invite the whole group to share what you heard. And again, I'm going to give just 3 minutes to this. Again, so it's for the group to say, start with the open phrase, the sentence, I heard, and just and offer that into the space. Something that you heard of your partner, of the future that they would like to see, and starting with, I heard. And anyone can speak when you feel called to, okay? So, off we go.
So we see what we heard from our partner?
So when you feel called to say, I heard, and share what you heard of what your partner was saying of the future that they would like to see. Anyone at any time.
With each other or
To the group, so in this collective space, yeah.
I heard that we need to be more connected to the land that we live in today, and be more thoughtful about where all our products come from, including natural resources.
I heard Sam say that he'd like to see a more open and more welcoming future amongst people, like in the culture of people that we live amongst.
I heard Julian would like to see compassion and shared living and assistance and the amygdala to be more important.
No.
Hello?
Amygdala down.
Be down. Yes.
I heard Jan saying people should devote their time and life to their passion and to what they love to do instead of working for the sake of money as an addiction.
I heard if there's going to be a future where access to education, and the need as well to reconnect and re-engage with nature. We don't have anyone.
I heard Claudia express the hope for a culture that brings about the solutions that we need. That we might have some hope of resolving them, at least a culture of resolving them.
I heard of a future that was very welcoming and opened people into each other's houses with open arms and fed them, which sounded quite nice.
I heard of a society that should look about its positive challenge instead of mourning about the negative one.
I've got another one here. I heard of a future that finds a way against negativity. So maybe touching on that.
Right, well, I heard a group of people co-create a new world. Thank you. So I want to move through now to share with you some experiences and learnings and ideas behind Extinction Rebellion. And we're going to talk about principles and values as being a kind of culture that guides all of Extinction Rebellion's work. A lot of thought's been put into these principles and values, and they are mutually reinforcing, helping create a culture within Extinction Rebellion where all individuals are valued and respected, as well as generating a powerful momentum for change. So the idea being that anyone that adheres to these principles and values, which I will put up, can take action in the name of Extinction Rebellion. So this is their culture. We have a shared vision of change, creating a world that is fit for generations to come. We set our mission on what is necessary by mobilising 3.5% of the population to achieve system change. We need a regenerative culture, creating a culture which is healthy, resilient and adaptable. We openly challenge ourselves and this toxic system by leaving our comfort zones to take action for change. We value reflecting and learning, following a cycle of action, reflection, learning and planning for more action, learning from other movements and contexts as well as our own experiences. We welcome everyone and every part of everyone, working actively to create safer and more accessible spaces. We actively mitigate for power, breaking down hierarchies of power for more equitable participation. We avoid blaming and shaming, recognising that we live in a toxic system, but no one individual is to blame. We are non-violent in our network. We use a non-violent strategy and tactics as the most effective way to bring about change. And lastly, we are based on autonomy and decentralisation. We collectively create the structures we need to challenge power. And anyone who follows these core principles and values can take action in the name of Extinction Rebellion. So these are the demands of Extinction Rebellions. You might call these the aims of a campaign. So firstly, to tell the truth, that governments must tell the truth about the climate and wider ecological emergency and work alongside the media to communicate with citizens. Secondly, to act now. Governments must reverse inconsistent policies and enact legally binding mitigation policy measures to reduce carbon emissions to net zero by 2025 and to reduce consumption levels. Thirdly, a citizens' assembly. To create a national citizens' assembly to oversee the changes as part of creating a democracy fit for purpose. So that's like a jury trial, bringing ordinary people by sortition processes into the room to make collective decisions on how to transform the economy. Because arguably all the answers are out there, it's just vested interests stopping action. So I'm sharing these as an example of, these are called their demands, but it's an example really of aims of a campaign, like I say. And the principles and values are the culture that underpin the movement and underpin all activity that works towards achieving these aims, these demands. So Extinction Rebellion is the fastest growing climate direct action movement in history. It's non-violent and it's non-hierarchical. Just to popcorn, so voices, share, whoever wants to just share things on what you have seen of Extinction Rebellion and how art is used to promote both its values and principles, i.e. its culture, and those demands. So what have you seen in how art is used to promote what I was just sharing there? Anything that comes to mind you can share?
The logo.
Sorry?
Maybe the logo?
Yeah, so the symbol, we'd call it, yeah.
The symbol, okay. The time, it means time, right? I'm guessing.
So it's like an hourglass, yeah.
I thought, yeah. I guess that's already a significant part of wider art of Extinction Rebellion, in the sense that it gives people the understanding that this is an urgent issue.
Mm.
Generally, it seems like the various different actions are quite artistic, theatrical, lots of colour, and that's generally what I've seen. Also seen like, well, sort of follows on with the logo, but like the little badges, so sort of somebody can pick up a symbol and be part of it very easily in that respect.
Mm.
Or flags, actually. I've seen quite a lot of flags going around, apart from people with kids. Kids seem to like the flags. Do they know what it means? I don't know.
I'm sure.
Oh yeah, what is your opinion about children participating in action? Like, for example...
I'm going to save questions such as that for the end, if that's okay. I'd like to just move through, talking about the creativity and the artistic practice within such campaigning. But yeah, thank you.
Well, I'm a little bit involved with Extinction Rebellion already, so I could say something about the fact that it's not going to be produced by a huge firm and handed out to everybody that's involved. It's going to be, it's being, there are wood blocks or some sorts of blocks, and people are doing individual printing very often for themselves, and that was happening during the occupation of Marble Arch, that people could go along and actually print the symbol on one of their own T-shirts or their own clothes. And another thing that I've realised is that I think it's fantastically well designed and thought out, because the logo seems to have a kind of immediate impact, but almost be a little bit possibly varying towards being fascist or something. It's very strong and immediate, but their idea is to use colours that aren't going to give that a backup as well. So the colours maybe might be using would be green or more pastel shades. So that I'm really grateful that this has all been thought about in advance, because I think it's really excellent idea.
Hi.
Yeah.
Hello. Would you like to share your name to the circle so we just know who you are that was walked in?
Hi everyone. My name is Joshua Komadi.
Joshua?
Joshua.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet you.
we'll break out, and I'm sure you'll get to know the names of the people that you might speak to when we do some exercises. So we're just reflecting on Extinction Rebellion as the movement and the art that you might have seen. I will show you some of the art, but I'm just wondering what stays with you from what you already know and what you've already seen about how art's been used to promote the values and the demands. Anything else that anyone wants to share?
I'm just aware of the Red Ladies. They were very enigmatic, and I don't quite know if they're just Extinction Rebellion or they're to do with something independent of Extinction Rebellion. But they're very moving to see, maybe 12 women dressed completely in red in a sort of a slow motion movement that they're able to do.
Yeah.
I think the red is to do with the overheated planet, from what I understand.
Yeah, and blood. You know, it's quite a visceral colour. But interestingly, that viscerality being put alongside the fact that those wearing red are silent and that they're moving in slow motion and they're there as a de-escalation tactic almost. So I will show you an image where, I think I have that image, but there's lots of imagery out there of this group called the Invisible Circus, who are in between police officers and maybe protesters who are either locked on to the boat or whatever, or might be processing, so marching, and they are just, making it clear that we're doing this with grace and in peace, actually. Yeah. Does anyone see anything else or anything that stays with you about any artwork that you might have seen?
Pink boat.
Pink boat.
Lots of pink things, but nice and garish. That always gets people's attention.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Well, I'll share something on the pink boat. So this is the pink boat that you are talking about. Tell the truth, that first demand written on the boat itself. I have a video to play, but I'm more concerned about it going a bit.
Maybe just turn it down a little bit. Last time it's quite loud.
Turn it up,
yeah.
So this is Oxford Circus with the pink boat. Is it ready?
Maybe. No. Wow, it's really struggling.
Great, thank you. Just to give you an idea. So if it just shows you a bit of the culture, let's call it, of one particular moment at Oxford Circus with that pink boat. I think this is how we get back. Is this how we get back? So that being an example of a cultural roadblock, as it's been called. So I'm just going to read a little bit about that cultural roadblock from a book that's just been published. You might have heard about this. It's called This Is Not a Drill, The Extinction Rebellion Handbook. It's a bestseller on Amazon already. It's only been out in the world for 2 days. So cultural roadblocks, it's written by James and Ruby of Extinction Rebellion. Any object placed in the middle of a road is an obstacle. However, without people around to take responsibility for its presence, it can easily be ignored and removed. A large concave frame of reclaimed wood in the middle of a bridge is just that, until it's activated by skateboarders, at which point it becomes a mini ramp, a meeting point, a media focus, an authentic creative vision of how much better things can be, a space for cars transformed into a people-first festival. Specifically talking about Waterloo Bridge there, turned into a garden bridge. Interested pedestrians want to take a closer look at a grand piano amplified by cycle-powered generators, to get a selfie with mobile papier-mâché sculptures, or sit by a row of trees in pots to eat the free lunch served by pop-up kitchen. In doing so, they reinforce the community and the obstruction, blurring a line between engaged audience and active protester. With time, people feel emotionally attached to these roadblock presences. They're defining cultural features of newly emerging micro-communities who will go to extreme lengths to protect them. This was particularly true of roadblocks that acted as creative platforms or stages, an open-sided van on the bridge hosting concerts and performers, and of course, the big pink boat. Through weeks of planning, our Extinction Rebellion boat managed to make a surprise appearance in the middle of Oxford Circus as the centrepiece of a Tell the Truth stage. This theme was chosen as a site is just a few minutes' walk from the BBC headquarters, where the climate and ecological emergency is not yet front-page news. Our first option was an incredibly heavy wooden boat, 32 feet long. This fell through when we realised that specialist trucks and driving licences would be required to bring it from a distant coastline to central London. With only days to go, we all started bidding enthusiastically on eBay. One tiny thumbnail image stood out from the others. Its rightness sang through the screen. There was just enough time on the auction, and it was only a few miles from central London and in sail-away condition. We bid determinedly. "So what are your plans for her?" the seller inquired when we went to collect in person. The boat had gone for a song, far less than he'd hoped, and he was being very decent about it. We couldn't let it go. Spontaneously channeling the spirit of a veteran skipper of few words, one of our team knelt down, opened up the boat's sailbag and gave it a strong sniff, as if checking for damp. This was enough to convince our seller of our maritime expertise. "We'll be taking her on quite an adventure," we assured him, and promised to send him photos. At 21 feet, this was no super yacht, but what made it stand out was the long fixed keel, which meant the boat sat high up on its trailer. The hull and its vital message would be always visible above the crowd, appearing to float on a sea of beautiful rebels. We decided to name the boat after Honduran activist Berta Cáceres. XR is an international movement, and while we are able to protest in relative security in the UK, 4 environmental campaigners are killed every week in the majority world. Berta was murdered for her activism, and we wanted to memorialise her incredible sacrifice. The original plan was to paint the boat in colourful dazzle camouflage, but it was decided that this would obscure the lines of the ship, and we wanted it to be unmistakable. So the natural conclusion was to paint it bright pink from bow to stern. Green or blue were dismissed as too boaty, yellow or orange too unnatural. Pink is a calm colour, without being soft, red is angry, pink is fun. It was only after painting it that we realised proudly, when viewed from above, there was now something vaginal in its appearance. Our team rehearsed the boat's delivery to Oxford Circus over and over again, but it was still an anxious time. We were running late and could see the crowds of protesters waiting by the side of the road, primed to jump out to create the protest. If they got overexcited and moved too soon, we would be blocked out with the other traffic. With victory in sight, a last-second check revealed that the light cable from the tow vehicle was still attached as the driver began to make his exit. Only quick action stopped a catastrophe. The wheel clamp went down and our mast went up to an unforgettable cheer. We had the crowd's attention. Now we had to make sure we kept everybody entertained. We had curated DJs and talks alongside events, including an International Solidarity Day with speakers from across the world. The sound system and lights ran entirely on renewable energy. Batteries were charged by the road-blocking solar array at Marble Arch, relayed to and from Oxford Circus by a team of XR couriers with trailer bikes. It was reliably loud. When the schedule went awry or the police had us surrounded, we had to improvise. Our main MC was actually in charge of production for the site. She'd never picked up a microphone before, but she stepped into the role and became intrinsic to the cultural character of the boat. The crowd held people's assemblies, expertly facilitated from the deck to decide our course of action and our resistance. For the first few days, the police mostly let us be, but affinity groups from Bristol and Wales had coordinated to lock on underneath the boat, establishing that it wasn't going to move, something that proved vital when the police really did try to move in. By literally gluing themselves to the boat, these brave people, the famous barnacles, gained us several extra days of safe anchorage. Creating a show and a traffic-stopping photo opportunity, the Emma Thompson moment I mentioned earlier, got us plenty of global media coverage and took our Tell the Truth message beyond the site. But it couldn't really capture the emotion and community around this roadblock. Each protest site developed its own unique culture and identity. Boat people were different from bridge people. We sent the boat seller a copy of a media piece headlined, "How to Get Arrested and Influence People," above a photo of the Berta Cáceres in all her pink glory, together with a message, "First leg of the journey complete. We haven't heard back." So there you go. I think that tells a really nice story of what they're called there, that cultural roadblock, and I hope that's some inspiration actually for the kind of future cultures that can be created and how the arts can be a part of that. So here we go. Here are some examples of XR in art. Some of which people have referred to, the flags. Someone referred to the colours, the really careful choice of colours here. What do you see in the colours and the symbols that are chosen? How is the culture and the demands, how are they promoted in what you see here? Can you all see that?
They're
okay.
quite pastel kind of colours, I guess. Maybe I'm like finding meaning where there isn't any, but maybe there's some fragility to that or something.
Yeah, that's absolutely part of it. Yeah, something about the fragility to and of life, and the interconnectedness with each other, and plants and other species is all a part of that, and the colour choices.
Perhaps in contrast to the sharp, defined colours that we see in mainstream advertising and anything that tries to grab our attention in a really sort of, social media kind of way that's, I don't know, flimsy in its philosophy, and this is like fragile but real.
There's quite a soft invitation as well, and
Yeah.
I think you spoke to that as well, Claudia. What else do we see here? About how it might promote the culture or the demands that we've spoken about. What do people see in the use of the skull? What demands might that speak to?
It's like death. I mean, to me, the first thing that comes to my mind is death. We're gonna be extinct, isn't it?
It's a rebellion against extinction. And I think that's really like key to remember, and it's visually represented there in that artwork. That death is represented, and giving a space to reflect on that and the grief that might arise from that is really essential to the movement. And so that's why that's there. What about these? Can you see these particular species here? So the butterfly and bee, dragonflies. I don't know what animal that is because I've cut it off. But yeah, it might be. But representing what?
The species that we're threatening.
Yeah.
Particularly pollinators, I guess.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, we've already wiped bison out, basically.
Yes, it's placing that centrally in the artwork as visual reminders, as provocations, more than just symbols. Yeah.
What's the meaning of the smile?
This here. Well, what do you see? Tell me what you see in that.
And someone shouting, but X on the eye. I don't know.
Oh yeah, I see the face now. Like
Yeah, it's a face
okay.
of someone shouting and I guess rebelling.
I was seeing like an exclamation.
I mean, this is the great thing about artwork. It's openly interpretative. So, what do others see in this?
Maybe because like when someone dies, normally like on cartoons they put an X in the eye.
Mm-hmm.
So it's showing that there will be. You have the name Extinction Rebellion because humanity could be extinct if you don't take action. So obviously extinction equals death. So perhaps that's why one eye is an X.
Like you have two options exactly, or maybe keep our species to rebel or extinct.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. I hadn't seen that before. But this is an alive eye, and this is potentially a dead eye. But also, what's the alive eye doing? To me, it looks quite alert. It's really seeing. It's really seeing the truth that might be quite an exclamatory thing. And we've got an exclamation mark there, as the nose and the mouth. I think there's a lot to that symbol.
Colour scheme as well is obviously instantly recognisable as hazard. Everybody knows it from bees or from warning signs or poison, danger, electricity.
Yeah. And you kind of get that idea speaks again in the high vis. You know, what do we see in the high? What does that bring up for us in this high vis that's being worn?
Like warning extinction.
Anything else?
This way, extinction.
Yeah. Anything else? 'Cause a multitude of meanings in artwork. That's the beautiful thing about it.
I always think the appropriation of the high-vis jacket is almost like an appropriation of authority or hierarchy, because there's such an instinct of that we have of high-vis equals someone in a position of power, which is why people use them to get into festivals.
Is it a way to correlate somehow to the Gilets jaunes in France?
That's what I thought actually.
I don't know actually.
But that's exactly
That's why they use
why they use it, because they're appropriating power that's been denied them.
Yeah.
And it's such a kind of, you automatically think, oh, someone who knows what they're doing, or someone who's in charge.
To me, it also speaks of someone that might provide support or safety.
Yeah.
You know, you also look to those figures that might wear high vis as someone that might be first aid trained, for example. So these are the people that might help.
Paramedics.
A paramedic, yeah. Yeah, great. There's a lot in this. And again, the hourglass symbol, time running out. I think the speaker might dive in, okay.
The sunglass within the circle could be seen as the time is right now, because the circle is inside is a finite figure.
Yeah, great. The time is now. Yeah, I hadn't thought of that as well. That's.
It's a time glass within a circle. A circle is a finite circle. It's not, it's a finite figure.
A finite symbol.
So it means the time is. The time is now. Is the circle has been completed.
Yeah, the circularity of time instead of it being a linear. There's.
You can
don't think about past, present, future. Think about now. The present moment is forever now. Now. Act now. That's second demand. That's very well promoted in that symbol, I'd say, actually. So you can see, so those three demands: tell the truth. You see that a lot here in varied ways. The second demand: to act now. We see that in very many ways. And the third demand: to look beyond politics, to find answers. Yeah.
Beyond politics or beyond economics.
I think, yeah,
Because
intrinsically
the
woven together. And I think the high vis might speak to that, as you've been saying, Julian, and that it's an ordinary person just wearing a high vis. They may not be special, deemed special at all. It's a mass movement.
I suppose in a situation where we're all equally threatened by a situation, there's no need for some people to be marked authorities over others anyway, because we're all doomed if we are doomed anyway, so we might as well.
We are not equally threatened.
We're not what?
We are not all equally threatened. Because in the last 10, 20 years, what happened in Sahel and Northern Africa, it didn't happen here. It will happen in another 10, 20, 30 years in Southern Europe. But the people that are living in Northern Europe, which is, by the way, the rich people, it will take a while before they will suffer. It will take another 2 generations before they will suffer what's going on now.
It's dependent on what kind of suffering we're talking about. We might experience a food crisis within our generation, within the next decade, and that will be the way that we experience this crisis. But yes, when what might that lead to, we don't know. But what you're saying is really important, and to bring in through the artwork those that already have their voices lost. Yeah.
Those that cannot speak anymore.
Exactly, and so that's about that, and that's represented through those species that are extinct or on their way to extinction. It's an important point to make. What's really really wonderful about the Extinction Rebellion artwork is that it's got a very do-it-together culture. So these symbols and this artwork is freely and readily available online for anyone to print, to replicate, to make their own banners with, to print onto their clothing. And in fact, you'll see stations of people at certain blockades with what Claudia was saying, with wood blocks to print, as I did on this book, truth and a skull, and on my coat, a butterfly. And so, again, thinking about how the symbols, how the artwork, how the messaging can spread, can grow, can keep living. And on that, I'm going to read another part of the book. Or in fact, why don't we read a paragraph at a time? Let's share the book around. Would that be a good idea, considering it's being... Yeah, you've got the microphone there. So this is, it's just 3 or 4 pages on The Arts Factory by Miles and Claire of Extinction Rebellion, to give an idea of how this artwork is made and the culture behind that. So if you'd like to begin here and just do, some paragraphs are really short and some are a bit longer, but just a paragraph at a time. If you don't want to read, you can pass the book on.
Arts Factory. We're not making one of anything. we're making 10,000 patches, flags for full-scale rebellion. We're making new things from old. We don't need new. We already have all we need. Share ideas, share skills, share paint, share clothes, destroy consumer products, transform them into your own messages. Nothing is for sale. This factory needs to be a community, and we try our best to be non-hierarchical. We start by setting the goals, showing everyone how to do the task allotted to them, giving them tools, and most importantly, the autonomy to do their own thing.
Diversity of producers is vital. Everyone brings something to the look of the rebellion. Some are good with colours, some are more playful. The messaging may be precise, but we need variety so it doesn't look static or formulaic. Our style must be dynamic, pushing forward. We avoid aggressive colours, no obvious left-wing reds or conservative blues, no alienation or division. We are rebelling for a cause that affects us, so we must be actively, it affects us all, so we must be actively inclusive.
Our main focus is at both ends of the day, preparing the print workshop so everyone has a good time and the tools they need. Sometimes it all descends into chaos, rushing around with buckets of ink and everyone's printing on everyone and everything.
We eat together. We encourage everyone to bring ingredients and cook together. When it gets really hectic, people end up sharing plates, dipping in, sharing mouthfuls. It gets intimate.
The anarchistic traditions of working with your hands and getting them dirty doesn't mean that outfits should be trashy. We'll hand paint banners and make sure they are as sharp as possible, thinking about how these might look in photographs, making the message clear, getting the font just right, but the odd drip looks really good. We need to embrace imperfection in a world where everything is too shiny.
Why an Extinction Rebellion arts factory? We call ourselves the Autonomous Anarchist Arts Factory. Among ourselves, since it describes what we're doing together. We're industrious for the rebellion. We present a different way of living. People buy things to make themselves feel good, judging themselves on social media, hunting for likes. If we can show them community, sharing food, sharing real human feelings, then it's not difficult to offer a better alternative.
We want to look unified, not uniform, but handmade. We want to save money. We aim to use ecologically sound materials, preferably recycled or reclaimed. Sourcing this material in volume is a huge job. The work we make contributes to telling the story of XR images that spread the message.
We embrace imperfection, mistakes, overthinking, and underthinking, the human touch. We have a DIY attitude. It is so joyful to work together on this, one of the most important projects of all time.
Would you like to?
Okay. Where are we up to?
Of all time.
Of all time.
No.
That's it then.
Is that it?
Oh, the first 2 pages.
Oh yeah. Oh no. Yeah.
I think that's it.
Yeah. I'll just read a little bit more here. So research and development phase. We spend much time and effort making prototypes, testing them, showing them to the group to get feedback, testing all the types of inks, taking advice from master makers on the best techniques. We like high vis. It signifies hazard, and activists are doing roadblocks, so there is a safety consideration. We talked a lot about imagery, and there is more variety on the way. We mostly used yellow, since the legal observers were going to be in orange. Many wood blocks were made over the months, and with each batch of prototypes, things were changed and improved. We had made lots of patches before. Given the time pressure, we just went for it, then improved the design for subsequent batches. We'll just continue to read. Here's sourcing samples.
sourcing samples and suppliers. Start early so you get great deals and to avoid any hitches in production. It takes time to find suppliers, receive samples, and make tests. The high vis comes from textile recycling factories. It's cheap, but takes some time to source and debrand. Production, production, production.
Right.
Over here.
Recruit a magnificent 7. You need a consistent team. We like 2 to 5 people working together per day from a stable of 7. This is a manageable size if the workers are dependable. Often people drop in for a few hours after work. Artistic reinforcements. This is great, especially because by the time we tend to be whacked, so we get to slow down, tidy up or cook by the team.
Tell everybody everything, then let them organise themselves. This frees up the coordinator to plan the future as well as empowering the team.
Okay. Write targets. Blackboard with goals and progress. Write targets. What's complete and what is still to be done. It is satisfying and ensures we tell everybody everything.
Rotate jobs so that everyone stays fresh and people can learn new skills. Make the factory a microcosm of the movement. At some point, the rising up core principles had spilled into us. We listened to anti-consumerist music and lyrics by Vladimir and Planet E, a continual reminder of our aims and ideals. We enjoyed making the future anarchist utopia a reality, even if only for a few weeks in the AAA factory.
Change the language we use. When talking about the work we make, it only takes a little effort to remind people how many dozens of people were involved in making one patch, from getting funding to admin to outreach to printing and attending protests and so on. We remind each other we're all connected and working together with love and grief and rage.
Reflection, research, and education. In between busy periods, we continue at a slower pace to research and develop ideas both new and old. We teach everyone other skills and discuss what we want the AAA factory to be and how it should evolve.
Workshop and outreach. We continue doing workshop printing on people's existing clothing, so the symbol and messages will be seen everywhere. More blocks are being cut with normal clothing and the human body in mind. The words of the imagery are always expanding.
Is that the end?
It's up to what we think about.
So we make and think about patches, overprinting, and why DIY is needed. Wearing a sash, being a message, embodying resistance. Reclaiming workwear, high vis as camouflage. Saying things without words. Everyone loves emojis. Lino cuts and wood blocks, the heritage of DIY print in revolutions. Taking a pre-apocalyptic approach to style and respecting what exists. We will never need another charity t-shirt ever again. DIY as a way of making people earn shit in through action. DIY as a way of making people earn shit through action. There we go. And on that, let's take a break. Let's take a short break, and then we'll come back together and start to devise potential creative actions for any campaigns you're currently working on, or just to imagine something that you want to create today. So we'll take 15, 10, how many minutes? So, welcome back. Hope you're feeling rejuvenated. Lots of hopefully inspiring stuff has been given to you to now think about the kind of action that you might take. So, looking at, again, from the point of view of XR, how creative non-violent direct action is taken to highlight XR's 3 demands that we spoke of. There are underlying principles of non-violent direct action, and the actions of XR can be categorized in 3 sometimes crossover ways. One might be to disrupt, to create disruption to public or targeted businesses through mass civil disobedience. A second might be to outreach, to an action designed to tell the public the truth and bring people together at the protest or through media. A third action might be to vision, to demonstrate the future we want to see through beautiful creative actions. So these are three actions, three kinds of actions that could be taken to promote the principles and values and the demands of XR. Non-violence is key. Our actions never involve any physical or verbal violence. We also show respect to opponents so as to make it easier to maintain a human connection and thus make a resolution of the political conflict more likely. Civil disobedience is mass participation. These actions are designed to get everyone involved. So these are some examples of creative responses or creative activity or creative actions that have delivered maybe one of those three types that I spoke of just now, or maybe more than. So when we're thinking about a creative action that might disrupt, or that might outreach, or that might vision the kind of future we want, we've got here an example of what I've shown already about the artwork being put on people's clothing. That's kind of like an action of outreach, right? For a message to be spread. These are the invisible circus performers that were spoken of, dressed in red. These performers were walking silently or just had a silent presence at actions that might have been designed to be arrestable actions, so they would be there to de-escalate. But also, there's something very symbolic in their presence too. And there's a reminder there of something beyond the action itself and why the action is being taken. And the idea with a lot of these that you can see, but in particular I can speak of both the kind of art factory work and the invisible circus, and even these skeleton creatures and humans that have been made for processions, is that these are all taking part in disruptive action. These all featured on blockades, for example, but also they're serving the task of outreach. So there are now, for example, Facebook event or group pages where there are instructions of how to be part of the invisible circus, how to create your own invisible circus. That's what these red performers are called, wherever you might be, or how to make these skeletons. So the information and the artwork has been disseminated for anyone to pick up and replicate elsewhere. Again, with samba drummers, there are now groups that meet all over the world to skill up and learn how to drum and to be ready to take what might be disruptive action. But is there anything that you want to comment here on what you can see that might speak to either disruptive creative action, visioning creative actions? There's something about the future world we want to see and how that's embodied in the activity here, and outreach, and how it might speak to the demands of XR and also the culture of XR. So just with the person you're sitting next to in pairs, if that would work, I think it does. Just a minute to share what you can see in this creative work here.
I think there is inherently this it's communicated that we need to resist a lot of I think our actions probably have a lot to do with it, and how we participate but I think just if we look at the bees themselves, I think it's just an ongoing maybe the bees are fast pollinated plants are the ones that can fly dying out because we use pesticides. I don't know what the
Come up closer if you can't quite see, but this is a piano on the streets being powered by bikes.
These giant bees look like are they just static? They're just sort of they're carried by people.
I think they could be both. So carried through procession or static as an installation. I think it might be a rhino. I'm not quite sure, yeah.
It's interesting using like skeletons and like I suppose what it might be like evidence of life. When it kind of implies that there's someone to observe the evidence that there was life.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Which is, yeah, like implicitly, yeah. It feels like it's almost like you want to kind of somehow represent nothingness because that's actually what it is. Which actually, if there's loads of skeletons but no one to observe them. Yeah, I don't know.
But I mean, in that case,
quite a weird conceptual way to think about how you recognise nothingness.
Probably
How you represent that rather than just death.
So let's just share one headline of what your groups were speaking about. You can just share one thing. Nominate a spokesperson from your group, from your pair. Let's start. Yeah, anything that you want to share. One headline of what you shared between you and reflecting on this.
Yeah, we noticed the people with the drums that want, just to call for attention of others, and we noticed that they're wearing military pants, so it might mean like they're an army of Extinction Rebellion. Well, I know that was my interpretation, but and then in general we see the dinosaurs, for example, the skeleton, to show that this is something that happened in the past and it can happen to our species as well if we don't act. And the bees is the same subjects we saw also in the art before, these skeletons.
Thank you.
Go, Claudia. I'll say you're there. Because, yes, we're talking about the piano being powered by the bicycles and how that seemed to be a real, or that presumably the speakers that are needed for the piano to be powered by the bicycles, and how that seems to be a fantastic demonstration of something which links into the climate change issues.
And the community that's needed to operate
How
one
many
piano.
might be needed, yes.
The collective kind of
Yeah,
power
it
in
offers
that.
like a solution. Like we're calling for action, and we are providing also, in a way, a strategy that we can make it. Yeah.
And so that it's so that the piano can be amplified, right? It's so that more people can hear
Exactly,
the piano
and
too,
more. It's great.
with
It's
via
gorgeous.
speakers. So they're powering speakers that are connected to the piano. So that bubble that grows, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Brilliant.
Yes. Yeah.
Using nothing but our own individual power, I suppose. Yeah.
spokesperson for this group, is that
Would you like
something to share?
Maybe thinking about how the like the power of the costume of the invisible circus, how it kind of extrapolates them from it makes them into almost different creatures who are not manageable or enforceable in the same way that humans who wear normal clothes are.
Yeah.
So I guess it's like the power of theatre allows. I mean, it would be very difficult as a police officer to confront someone or a group of people who are all dressed like that, than it would a bunch of hippies who they're used to dealing with. it's much more, it's much just aesthetically a much different proposal.
Yeah, that's a lovely reflection. Similar idea to clowning, actually.
Yeah, exactly.
And there's lots of clown groups at protests who play in that funny space of they are disrupting, but there is again a de-escalation tool. But how can you enforce, or the words you say, how do you manage a clown?
Yeah.
It's a dilemma. You're proposing a dilemma for police, for example, who might be present. Right.
Yeah, we had a few things also, but perhaps the bees. I mean, maybe the representatives of nature. I think, there's just an inherent part about bees, I suppose, that just alerts us always that, especially if we're finding it outside a bush or something, like as a demonstration, that it's actually signifying some sort of urgency because they no longer will be there at some point in time. We also mentioned the blood aspect, which is quite out there, so to say.
Which one, sorry?
The blood.
The blood, yeah.
Yeah, it's quite out there. I think it probably would get people to think, at least wonder what's. That blood is. I think it's quite powerful. Just having, it's a massive amount of. I think it would get people thinking about like what's kind of like just death in general. Perhaps connected with the heat that they might be experiencing this summer. I don't know.
And this action was called Blood on Our Hands. So it's also saying we are culpable here for the deaths that have already happened because of climate change. And so it's acknowledging that from a Western point of view as well. And there's something very beautiful about these bees. So it's reminding us also of the beauty and honouring that in a space where we are fighting against their extinction. And so allowing beauty to be a part of the creative act. I mean, it's implicit, really. Great, well, there's loads more that can be reflected on there, but I think there's lots of examples there of how creative action can embody and envision the future that we want to be living in, or the future culture that we want to be working towards. But it also can be a tool to spread awareness of the truth, that first demand of Extinction Rebellions. But I think art is a wonderful tool for outreach, and how art can help messages spread, and in all their multiplicity of meaning as well. So the aims of any XR Arts working group, which I'd say can be adapted for any creative campaign, is to devise and develop ideas to disrupt outreach and vision through creative, non-violent direct action, some examples that I've just shown you. Communicate and amplify the 3 demands of XR. Awaken, inspire and empower people to transform denial into action. Create and hold spaces for people to grieve, emote, transform and resist together. Enliven and regenerate the spirits of rebels on the streets who are taking non-violent direct action, and to build the XR community through collaboration, workshops and cooperation. So I think this is a really good time to now reflect on what might your demands and aims for a better future be. We've talked a lot about Extinction Rebellions, and now I invite you to think about your own. And what might the culture and the principles and values be that are embedded in your practice that embody the future you wish to see? And how can the arts be used to promote all of the above? And that is the storytelling. How the arts is used is a storytelling of your culture and a storytelling of your demands or your aims. So it's a creative strategy for your campaign. So I'm inviting you to answer these questions for yourselves and to spend some time working on them. You may be here with your own campaigns in mind, or you might be developing something, or you may actually just want to think of something out the box here today. And so what I would suggest is that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It's up to you whether you might as well get involved. If we divide into groups of 3, 1, 2, 3, a 3 and a 2, to spend just 10 minutes reflecting on this. Is there anyone that's here that feels that they'd actually like to spend some time working on their own thing?
You mean a whole thing? Like a...
So, for example, I mean, Sam, I mean, you're in a perfect position. You could contemplate interdependence when looking at these 3 provocations. But there might be something else that others are working on, or you can create something together. So does anyone have anything that they'd like to specifically look at in answering these questions? Just raise your hand if you do. Yeah?
I would definitely think about it in the context of interdependence, yeah.
So that might be the 3 of you, actually. Would you like to? Yeah, I think that's a really good idea. So we've got interdependence as a campaign, let's call it. And hands up, there are a few other hands that were bringing ideas.
I just wanted, because obviously we know what's happening, we know about climate change, but if you were in an environment or a culture that, let's say, it's not like it doesn't know, but it ignores it. So how do you make a campaign that it can actually, how can I say this, to create more awareness, but in the sense of like making this extinction imminent, you know?
Great. What you've just named there is a potential campaign to start exploring. So about how to raise awareness of the situation we're in.
How do you integrate people in this issue? I mean, it's not even an issue; it's a reality.
Okay.
I don't know how to. But yes.
You've got a seed of an idea there about integration and awareness building and outreach. And so that could be something that people could gravitate towards you if anyone would like to work on that with you for 10 minutes. Did you have something, Claudia, as well?
Well, I think it's because I'm thinking about a particular event next week that's going to be happening. So I've got that kind of event in my mind, which is us in Camden. We're going to be blocking a road and something else is happening, outdoorsy kind of thing. So I'm quite interested to sort of
contemplate
discuss
on that.
those kind of things and the clashes between the different issues.
Okay.
But I might do that on my own, possibly.
Yeah, it's up to you. I mean, the offer is there, I would say, for anyone to gravitate towards these 3 campaigns that have been named. Is there anything else that's in the air for anyone about what they'd like to bring to the space or that they might be personally working on?
No, I'm thinking, when people are aware of what is happening, and my own thinking is how can we rescue ourselves? Like, what are the things we need to do, even though everyone is aware these are the things causing climate change, but what are the things to stop or to inhibit, to just bring it down, even though they are aware? I don't know whether I get what I mean.
So you're talking about...
like you say, aim for better future. No, as in...
Sure.
Like as I was telling them that, okay, we know carbon dioxide is one of the major greenhouse gas. Then how can we stop this? Like, what are the things that we can just think about, little, not the major ones that we can just create in people, like probably stop doing this. At least we lessen the problem we're having.
Great. This is it's a seed of an idea here. The question being, if I was to simplify it and tell me if this is a good reflection of what you're saying, how we can stop emissions rising, or how can we stop fossil fuels?
Yeah.
How can we abolish fossil fuels?
Yes.
Yeah. How can we abolish fossil fuels now?
No.
So that's a question. Would you like to explore that?
Yeah. Though. Yeah.
Yeah. So we have I'm going to allow you to self-organize that radical concept that's at the heart of XR and many other things too. So we've heard that there's interdependence that's brought us all here together, that you can gravitate towards Sam if you'd like to brainstorm on that with him regarding these questions. We've got about abolishing carbon emissions and fossil fuels over here with Joshua. And we've got something about outreach and raising awareness. And we've got something about a very specific activity perhaps happening with XR Camden. And so I'm going to leave you all to self-organise, take some paper, some pens, converse with each other, scribble some ideas down in relation to these 3 provocations, okay? I'm going to give you 10 minutes. So it's 20 to 4, back at 10 to.
If someone's watching as a video, perhaps to work on their own idea that they're thinking about, as we've just discussed.
Exactly. Great, thanks Sam. Off you go. Okay. Unfortunately, I'm going to pause your growing conversations for you to only pick them up in the future at some point at your convenience. So let's just gather round for a final circle. Great. Thanks for that. I hope that was useful, and I hope, like I say, that's the beginnings of is it working? The beginnings for you of new campaigns or strengthening pre-existing or existing campaigns that you're working on. There might be seeds of ideas here that I really encourage you to give time to and to allow to blossom and to bring others to form groups around to make it, to turn it into reality. I think the key message for this, for these times, is that we are all agents of change, yeah, and to bring all of our creativity to that, and all of our, desires for new cultures into that too. So yeah, thank you so much for today, and this was here as just some top tips from XR on a creative campaign, which I can share. I can maybe pass on for you to share to the group afterwards. It's quite a lot to read. But what we'll do is I'd love to kind of close today by saying a really heartfelt thank you, and just to go around the circle and to share any final words or how you're feeling right now, or if you have a burning question for either myself or the group to ask it. Now's your opportunity. I will say that I may not be able to answer all questions, so I will point you in the direction of where best to go to. But specifically, questions on what I've shared with you today, and how to bring the creative tools and arts and culture to your campaigns. So we'll go around.
Yeah, I think it was great to see the kind of whole spectrum of what Extinction Rebellion has been up to. I think it certainly gave some inspiration on kind of how perhaps a kind of 21st century type movement can take shape in one of the biggest cities in the world. I think, London has 12 million people. I think there's a lot of people that have similar kind of sentiments. I think it just kind of reinforces the fact that there are people who are feeling certain emotions, and there are people who have discovered ways to kind of share them out in a way that is kind of bringing more people in. And I think, it's good to have had almost like a crash course on kind of seeing everything and kind of hearing the latest. We read the books together today, and it was just released 2 days ago. I think that was great.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, firstly, thank you so much for sharing all of that. It's been really, really interesting. I think the thing that, sort of take away from this, we've talked a lot about telling a new story and the storytelling, and it feels like a lot of these kind of campaigns, if you like, or the art is very much the way of doing that in the live, if you like, in the real. So just kind of quite excited to think about how we might go about doing that, and I'm sure it's kind of it seems like a great area for people to really channel their creativity and hopefully have some fun in the process, which shouldn't forget about that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you very much. I really appreciate what you have to say and offer. I really oscillate between extreme motivation and extreme interest and desire to do something, and extreme despair. And I don't know if I can advocate that as a state of mind for most people, because it's quite exhausting. But I think perhaps one of the main takeaways, particularly with regard to arts in this field, is that it's a really low barrier to entry way of getting people engaged with the ideas that are quite high concept and quite conceptual and abstract. And if you were going to be reductive about them in a kind of linguistic sense, you would need to spend quite a lot of time explaining how the current system works, how we might improve it. And I suppose art is kind of a shortcut to those conversations and a shortcut to those expressions. And I think it's really, personally, lots of helpful thoughts and inspiration about how that might be achieved. So I'm really grateful for you.
Thank you.
Have to say. Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you. Though I came in the middle of the lecture, I think I've learned a lot today, especially from the book there. And I read a part there where I see people coming together with one mind, and they say they share things together just to be able to communicate their mind to the public. Different thing. Say they cook together just so that we'll come together, coming together as one mind, then displaying what they want, what they really want to express to the public. Then with different creativity picture showing what they want to communicate to the public. And again, I really I was happy being here, and this is time I've spent. It's a great time. Thanks.
I'm glad you came in, even though it's great to welcome people at any point of their entry. So thank you for joining.
Yeah, thank you for the talk, because it's always good to see the creative minds behind all that. Sometimes I think it's underestimated. But for me, art is the science of communicate, and you could have the numbers, you could have organization, everything, but if you don't have a meaning and a language on how you're going to communicate all that, I mean, it's pointless. So thank you for that, and for reminding us the importance of this tool. And also, I wanted to ask you, would you recommend this a book or I don't know, any other resources about how to communicate campaigns, or
how to communicate
communications in campaigns, or a structure of it?
Not off the top of my head, but let me get back to you on that.
Sure.
Because you may be coming at, because your approach, your study has been business. Is that right?
Not really.
No, did I make a wrong note there?
No,
that was
no
someone
worries.
else. That was you. Sorry.
No
but let's have a conversation about that. Yeah.
Sure. Thank you.
Yes, no, thank you very much. I've really appreciated the fact that it's been a sort of group discussion, and having everybody here with their strong feelings about it. And when particularly, I think when we're trying to envisage the future, it's a very sort of moving thing to do with people. And I really thank the interdependence people for organising it as well, because it's and it's quite an unusual. I'm not often able to be at meetings where you can really discuss things at such a deep level. So I'm quite moved.
Good, I'm glad. Okay.
Thank you for showing us the creative side of Extinction Rebellion. I think makes me realize, I mean, sometimes I myself, but I think many of us feel a bit overwhelmed I often don't know how to communicate about all the issues we're facing.
about all the impact we're having, especially to people that are not really aware about it, and you don't know where to start. And I think using arts, music, poems is just such an easy way to just catch people's attention and touch their feelings, and then once that is done, they can just start engaging themselves and informing themselves. So I think it's a really good way to get people on board. And so I also really want to join the movement as soon as possible, as soon as I know where I live, because I'm a bit, I don't know where I'll move to, but yeah, it makes me want to join the movement.
Oh, I'm glad. Thank you.
Thank you very much for today. For the wider climate movement, who do you think is the best or worst out of the candidates for Prime Minister?
For the wider climate movement, who do I think is the best and worst prime ministers?
No, best or worst candidates out of the current candidates for the next Prime Minister.
Are we talking about the UK here?
Yes.
Let's save that conversation for when we're offline. But thank you for the pertinent question. I'll wrap up unless, and Sam, you may want to too, because I know it's just gone past 4 o'clock. But it's been a real delight to be here and to have had the time that we've had to delve in and to share with you. It's been a really lovely exercise for me, because I haven't actually, it's the first time that I've gone back through, I mean, I say the archives, there aren't any. This is now the archive of the Letters to the Earth and the Culture Declares, and even the creative work of Extinction Rebellion. For me to have put this together, it was a really useful exercise for me, and a really lovely way to reflect on it all, actually, and to kind of look for the first time at what was achieved in such a short amount of time. So it made me quite proud of, the collective co-creation there. And I hope it is an inspiration for you all to take on in whatever you do. So, yeah, big thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.